Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We are starting our next session, which is public transportation and focus on the user. I invite Darya Borisova, who will moderate at the session. Good afternoon. It's time to start for us. So we will speak about the development of public transport in Moscow, and I would like to invite all speakers and panelists to proceed to the stage. They are Maxim Liksutov, Vadim Khrapoun, Federico Casalegno, Pierre Laconte, and Kulveer Ranger. So you are kindly invited to the stage. Today we will talk about public transportation. It's the third transport ring in Moscow that arouses a lot of transport, and 88% of public cars cross and use that what we call the third transport ring. It has become a total necessity for all the citizens in the city, and in order to cope with traffic jams and congestions, for the city, one of priorities is to promote and further develop public transport, to make it comfortable and very speedy, so that in the UK and London, where 95% of all visitors come to downtown by public transport, we would like to have that opportunity in Moscow too. So I'm turning the floor to Maxim Liksutov, Deputy Mayor on Moscow on transportation and transportation infrastructure, to speak first. Thank you very much, Darya. It's a great challenge for us, having in mind that 95% of all the visitors coming to downtown by public transport. So we prepared a presentation which is entitled Public Transport Focus on the User. And in order to cope with that problem, we should really revise the existing approaches on the part of the city to that challenge, and we should understand that those passenger kilometers and other indicators formally represent the true passengers, and we need to make transportation comfortable and attractive for them. And we need to overcome that moral barrier in using public transport. So we hope that it will become a very attractive alternative for our people. And the mayor of Moscow has the same vision, and our focus on a user slogan is really a priority for us. In my presentation, I would like to speak on 4 major points. And in fact, it's in hierarchy of components to support the sound transport strategy which we are implementing. First, it's a pedestrian. It's our first priority, then public transport, then moving cars, and fourth, parked car. Those are the components that are pillars of our long-term planning programs. Here we are. So very briefly, I'll speak of the existing transport system. It's the data of 2011, and as you can see that the annual average daily passenger throughput in metro is 6.5 million. And last week we had very heavy snow, resulting in 30 35 to 45 centimeters of snow cover. And we appeal to the people to use public transport instead of driving a car, and the passenger throughput rose up to 9.5 million those days. Railway links 1.5 million, and ground transport, including streetcars and buses, about 6 million passengers a day. It's not only the Moscow government firms and companies, but the public companies too. And overall, in 2011, there were some 35 billion people who were carried by the public transport. And here are the challenges that we need to address. And unless we do it, transportation will not be comfortable. We need to enhance throughput by 360 passenger seats per hour. And the second task is to reduce by 25% the travel time in public transport in rush hours from 67 down to minutes, down to 50 minutes by 2020. If you need more details, you can ask me a question so that I would comment on on what progress we are making along that line. And here are some of the projects or programs that make up our transportation policy here in Moscow. And I would like to comment on them rather briefly, and just some figures and numbers. Ground or surface transportation, both this year and the next year, we are going to introduce more dedicated lanes for public transport. And today's snow again shows us that there is no alternative for public transport. And even those who are deeply rooted in driving their private cars would have some incentives to switch to public transport in adverse weather conditions. So 272 kilometers is the run of today, and there will be another 60 kilometers of dedicated lanes in the next year. As for the management and control systems, I can say that next year we're going to amend and alter the existing network of all the routes. So we are going to add more inputs on intervals, on modes of transportation, on rush hours, off-rush hours, and seasonality will also be accounted for, as well as holiday time. And so the system is going to be passenger-oriented and very dynamic. We're going to complete it till the middle of the year. As for the management and control system of the transport system, this month we're going to launch a pilot project, and transportation companies will get some licenses and will be paid for only for meeting all the requirements in terms of standards and quality. That's the objective for the next year. And in the next year, many existing routes are going to be altered and upgraded, and we will totally switch and change the system of management and control. We'll have unified passes for all modes of transportation, and those passes and tickets will be distributed to meet the demand. As for the metro system, transportation system, we'll have 60% more of capacity, 16 more new stations, 145 new kilometers. As for roads, I think a lot of true experts are present in the audience, and we are going to account for their opinion. And we are going to upgrade exit avenues and fast streetcars and buses will also be further developed and promoted. We are going to build more lines for streetcars and routes for buses. We are going to upgrade 11 kilometers for streetcars this year. And in the next year, we will add to that. And the individual issue and challenge is the restoration of some streetcar lines that historically were present here. We picked 6 lines with a total length of 21 kilometers. We are working on that now, and probably all those routes will be restored. Parking is another very painful challenge and issue, and paid parking will be further promoted, and preferences will be given to low mobility citizens and those who live in downtown. Park and drive lots will be enlarged. Cargo logistics will include the constraints and some restrictions on trucks for the outer ring road, and we will introduce some constraints and restrictions for the incoming trucks into the city. And the logistic chain is going to be changed. Warehouses will be removed from the city, and it's another individual program. Alternative modes such as cycling, walking, and pedestrian lines is another component of the program. If questions arise, I'll elaborate on that. We are simulating many segments of the system, trying to figure out the best modes for traffic lights, and we came up with a mathematical model enabling us to simulate and trial those decisions that we are about to take. Very briefly on the programs that I have voiced out. First of all, it's the unified passes system. We are going to introduce some new types of passes, including universal pass, valid for all kinds of transport, and it will be based on the principle of single validation per single trip in any category of transports, something that has become common in many cities in the world. And another category of a pass that I think will win support is a 90-minute pass. And it will trigger the number of passengers, specifically for those who would like to travel by metro longer in order not to change to other modes. So the main feature here is 90 minutes validity and unlimited changes, switch to any other modes with only one trip on metro. And it will be rated at a single tariff. The same pass has already proven to be efficient in other cities. So Moscow authorities are confident that it will succeed here too. Then some more information on passes and tickets, and we're going to introduce another smart card or e-ticket, and its holders will have a chance to convert it into any kind of a ticket, and you can add money to that ticket. It will be something like an account of the cell phone. And it will be valid as a payment instrument for all modes of transport. In 2013, it will not include commuter trains, but I think that in the next year, commuter companies will join in, and in 2014, it will also be used for commuter trains as well. Further on, cycling rent can be added to its functionality, parking fees, and some other services rendered in this city. We are negotiating with the government of the Moscow region on that issue so that it can be a single pass for the entire Moscow region and the city of Moscow. On the slide, you can see the specifications of that kind of pass. And again, if more questions arise, I'll take them. Distribution will be very important, and its criterion will be based on passengers' demands and depending on throughputs of passengers in morning and after hours. We will see where distribution channels or points of sales are to be located. Another slide on streetcars, rapid and buses, rapid or fast routes. On the map, you can see the 12 routes that we're going to turn into fast lines. We're going to launch LRT streetcars or buses movement by dedicated lanes. And our ultimate objective here is to have up to 15,000 passengers per hour in each route as a capacity. It's the proper intervals fixed for each route, and also we are working on those routes where there are not many subway stations or commuter train stations. So here on the map you can see those 12 lines, and we hope that in Q1 of the next year we will start the implementation. That next slide is about paid parking. I don't think I have to explain why paid parking is absolutely necessary in this city. And we hope that this will help us to increase the number of parking lots, reduce driving time, and enhance pedestrian areas. So those are the effects of the project that we can foresee. And in terms of social tension, it's quite challenging, but we also realize that there is no other alternative to cope with driving problems. We're not going to charge for the entry into the city, but we're going to really improve our payment system, parking payment system. Yesterday, the mayor met with the citizens and the public. He really listened to them and accounted for their comments. So next Tuesday, at the meeting of the Moscow government, we are going to introduce those changes into the pilot project, and then we will come up with the proper rules effected throughout the city. Certainly it's not a Bible, those rules are subject to change, but we try to address most sensitive challenges. The next slide has to do with the intellectual transportation management and control. It's the average speed and safety. It is composed of various sub-programs, transport flows detection and monitoring, the billboards for drivers, traffic control improvements, and recording of traffic rules violations. Recently, the Moscow government took a resolution so that starting from January 1st, all city utilities and services, all those who try to who need to stop traffic in order for repairs or for any other activities, they will have to mandatorily notify our department, our traffic control center, and they have to specify the purpose for that traffic stoppage, and they have to apply all the necessary information for that. Bypasses are to be identified, and so that in advance, so that drivers could see where they can drive to circumvent all those jams. And finally, I would like to show you some model of traffic flows. And next year, I think we will complete it by 90%. And that model will enable us to come up with a very accurate forecast, meaning the intensity of traffic at every hour, and we will be able to link our development plans with the development of infrastructure. And finally, there is the supervision over the efficiency of the transport policy. There is always a lot of criticism on the part of the public for any kind of decisions we take. However, we would like to demonstrate that and make it public that what we do not run against their interests. So far, we do it in manual control, but we are to be also self-critical, and we will have to do our part of homework as well, so that our decisions would be the best and most optimal for the city. Thank you.
If possible, just one question using my right as a moderator. So you mentioned the paid car park and the parking meter zone. So what's going to happen with the residents? So you mentioned that already. Thank you very much. That's a kind of a question that people often ask us about this. As you know, we've the 1st of December. It's been just 1 month since the beginning of this pilot project. So we started introducing this within the frames of this pilot zone, the test zone, but it would be I understand it's impossible to do this in such a way that all systems should work, without a hitch, so we actually understood that it's not going to happen like this, so there will be some mistakes. That's inevitable, so we were ready for criticism. So all our actions were aimed at ensuring that it's going to be running as smooth as possible, just as a pilot project, as you understand. So the task we set here is to analyze, to review everything that's going to happen within this program until 28th of February. So what kind of changes should be done there, the icons on the website or anything, So what are the actual results of the first months? So the first month's results, I can tell you that in the pilot zone, in this parking metered zone, the throughput, the traffic throughput, has increased 30%. The capacity of this area, actually. There's a second important result is when a person leaves a car in the parking meter zone, it was roughly the average time a car spends there is 1 hour 20 minutes. That's according to our measurements. The third important point that we've measured is that roughly 45% of all parking lots between 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. Were actually free. So there were always maybe about 50 to 20 free parking lots, vacant parking lots, but nevertheless, you can always find a place there. So this sort of results allow us to think of some new rules for the residents of this pilot area. So there is a group of initiative enthusiastic people among the local residents. They wrote letters to the government of Moscow suggesting that we should meet up and discuss the different decisions. So yesterday our mayor held a meeting with the residents. It was in unofficial setting, informal setting in a restaurant, and the local residents told the mayor about the problems they're concerned about. First of all, about the paid parking lots. So we made a decision that for those residents who find themselves in these parking meter zones, so it will be free parking for them. The only payment they have to pay is about 3,000 to 4,000 rubles per year just to get a license, to get a permit. So if there is, for example, a house with a parking lot, so we're going to provide one parking lot per each flat, irrespective of how many people have the right to use this parking lot. So those who have no courtyards, they will be provided with 2 resident permits for free parking. And the third important point is disabled people, invalids, the Second World War veterans will have the right to free car park, not only there, but within any parking zone in the central administration district. So the next step we are going to take in this direction is that that one car should not spend more than 2 days on one parking lot. First of all, we don't want to transform the traffic system in a place for a car park, because if a person uses a car quite often, he will have to change the place to move the car somewhere, because there's a question of snow clearing. So that's kind of decisions we've made there. Thank you very much. After the speakers' presentations, there will be a series of questions, Q&A sessions. So now I'll give the floor to our guest, Kulveer, who a former advisor to Mayor of London on transport, environment and digital technology. He was involved in many major important infrastructure projects in London, many solutions concerning intermodality and development of infrastructure. So Kulveer, would like you to share your views with us and how it can be done efficiently and quick enough, because we would like our transport to become as high quality as possible, as soon as possible.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize from the start. My Russian is non-existent, so I will be speaking in English. And I would like to thank the City of Moscow, the Deputy Mayor, and the organizers of the Urban Forum for inviting me here today. It really is a privilege to be here in Russia, in Moscow, somewhere I've always wanted to come to, and this has given me a reason to come. And I will start by saying that it's not as bad as you think. Whenever you think it is bad, it can always be worse. And I say this because, you know, I look at the Deputy Mayor here, and I know I have a wry smile on my face. I shared your job. I had a similar role in London for over 3 years. Every morning you wake up and somebody rings you probably about 5 in the morning and tells you what is not working. Which train, which road, which tunnel, which river, the problems. Then you switch the radio on, and the radio tells you what really isn't working and what people are complaining about. And once you've dealt with that, you decide, okay, what do I need to tell the mayor isn't working? Because the challenge is that in a major city, whether it be London, whether it be Moscow, whether it be Rio, whether it be Los Angeles, whether it be Mumbai, to make those cities work, transport has to work. And going forward, we live in an era of cities. You will hear a lot in this forum and everywhere else you go that the world's population is moving to cities. 50% are there already. In the next 20 years, maybe 70% will be there. Vast population growth. It's unsustainable if we do not embrace public transport. We have to move people and continue to have modal shift onto public transport. But there are many different ways of doing that. We in London spent the last 4 years preparing for an Olympic Games, a royal wedding. Little did we know that there'll be a royal birth as well now, recently announced. Another public transport user, I hope, arriving next year. But the challenge actually is that finding new solutions to the problem of increasing demand and the problem of actual mobility, individual and personal mobility. And as we go forward, we must embrace not only building our way to deliver infrastructure that will provide increased capacity, but technology, because it's technology that will underpin what we do. And just briefly, I'll say, you may wonder the fancy titles that we all have, deputy mayors or advisors or directors or whatever it may be. It's what we deliver, it's what we get done that will benefit our cities. I've been very fortunate in my career to have worked on projects like the Oyster Card, the cycle hire scheme, which is affectionately known as the Boris Bikes, delivering a policy for smoothing traffic flow in London, looking at how we can make London better pedestrianised, and fundamentally delivering new infrastructure and making the case to government 2 years ago for Crossrail, the biggest transport project in Europe at £15 billion. But I will talk more about those in a second. Firstly, we must always understand that the context that we are working in. And in 2008, the mayor became, for his first term, the mayor of London, and asked me to take on the transport brief. Now, we had an economy that was suffering, we had a downturn coming in, we have a slash of public financing, and therefore there wasn't much money to be spent. In fact, an ex-chief secretary in the Treasury left a note saying, all the money is spent, good luck. Where do you go from there? So when you think it's bad, it can always be worse. But the challenge is that we have cities that are dynamic, cities that are really moving forward, and there's lots going on. And I'll use London as an example, but really it does mirror what Moscow has. And if we look at the size of Moscow and London in terms of population, we're about the same, 8 to 9 million. You know, we have an extensive population moving in and out of the city. And regardless of what people say this morning, I believe there's a deep cultural roots in both cities, a tradition for culture, theatre, the arts, and enterprise. And we have a dynamic population that likes to get on with it, whatever the challenge. So, you know, London by numbers, you can see yourself there, some of the amazing facts that there are, the growth of jobs, the population, and fundamentally, we are a business city, and I know Moscow is a business city. So everything that we do, we must bear in mind that our cities are succeeding. But there is more going on beneath that success. There is convergence happening, whether it be the worlds of finance, film, digital technology. These industries are coming together, and generally things that bring them together are, what is that city good at? Now, in London, we have a huge financial centre, so there is a lot of money there. We also have a deep asset that we call our legal system that is respected throughout the globe. That is also bringing people to the city. But if they can't move around the city, they leave as quickly as they come. So underpinning a success, underpinning this convergence, must be the ability to move. And if we can't move people, that is the problem. So what do? You look at what you can build. And what we have built is new infrastructure, or in fact, in the first instance, rebuild. Now, next year, our metro system, the London Underground, will be 150 years old. That is an achievement in its own right. Every day, it moves just over 4 million journeys. It takes 4 million journeys a day. Now, that's a lot, but we also have a bus network that moves 6.5 million journeys each day. And on the roads, we have 10.5 million journeys. So as much as we like to move people to public transport, we know there is capacity and constraint. So we must rebuild our public transport system, and we've been rebuilding our underground. New lines, improvements to the signaling system, increasing the size of our key interchanges. However, when you do that, you cause disruption. And I'm sure I don't need to speak to the Deputy Mayor when I say one of the things that people will complain about more than the problem of not moving is the disruption caused by rebuilding and remaking some of the existing infrastructure. However, we're also building new. Could I ask, who in the room knows about Crossrail? A couple of hands. All right. Crossrail is a very large public transport program in London. It is a new line going from east to west, from outside the city. And when it comes into the boundaries of the city, it goes underground. And a brand new tunnel is being dug through the heart of the city. It is much, much bigger than the existing tunnels that we have for the underground system. And the stations will be less frequent, so your journey time through the city is very fast. In fact, to give you an example of the size and scale, the station that is being built at Oxford Street, the junction of Oxford Street with Tottenham Court Road, runs a third of the length of Oxford Street and is about £1 billion of cost. The station that is going to be built at Canary Wharf is the size of the is bigger than the size of the Canary Wharf Tower if you placed it down and put it on the ground. These are massive, huge structural engineering projects, but fundamentally delivering 10% increase to our public transport capacity in London by 2018. And we have other things, obviously, aviation requirements, and going further, high-speed rail. The need to integrate high-speed rail networks into our cities is paramount when we are going to ease the pressure of how people get in and out, especially from local places such as Europe or other cities in Europe or other cities in the UK. But transport is not the full stop. It's about where are you putting transport and why are you doing it there. Now, the three images there are very different, yet they all talk about urban regeneration. In the east of our city, I'm sure most people here saw the Olympic Games take place. We're very proud, they were very successful, but a lot of people worked very hard not to deliver an Olympic Games and a Paralympic Games for a period of a couple of weeks this summer, but to regenerate a part of the city by ensuring that key infrastructure was in place so that, A, when people come to the Games, obviously they had a good experience getting there and getting away, but for the future, when people live there, when jobs are there, when residential housing is there, that is underpinned by good transport links. It does not become a white elephant, and it doesn't become a place that people find it difficult to get to. The new interchange at Stratford Station, with rail, with underground, with overground, with road. Our interchanges are the key to delivering growth at key areas in the city. If we do not look at the interchange and how people will move when they come to that place, we have a real problem. And I say this because at the start I talked about multimodal journeys. I believe that going forward, the interchange is king. Where several modes of transport, bus, tube, rail, car, pedestrian, cycling come together is the point where you have to have maximum efficiency, because you can build all the infrastructure, but if people can't move around those areas quickly, they will not use them, or they'll become frustrated. So our interchanges as we go forward are crucial, and we must pay attention to them when we devise the strategy to deliver key projects. And that's why we've also got a delightful new link, which is what we call the Emirates airline, the first cable car to run in London. And that's also a bit of a tourist thing, but it's also a key link crossing the river. So not only do we build trains and roads, we can be playful and we can come up with new innovative ideas. But the more that we look at delivering this infrastructure, we have to look at financing it and how we operate it. Now, one of the great challenges that has been for us in the UK and a lot of cities and administrations in Europe is public sector financing. I'm sure no one in here is unaware of the burden being placed on governments at the moment in times of austerity and in times of recession. Money is difficult to come by. Yet sometimes there is plenty of money in the cities, in the private sector. And what we must do as city administrations, or those of us who have worked there and now work in the private sector as well, is build new models to unpin that money and make sure that it can come into these investments. Because the things we are talking about is not just for the city of Moscow to deliver, and it's not just for the Mayor of London to deliver. If our private sector organizations do not help us, these cities will become difficult places, not just to live in, but to work in. This is a win-win situation. We must have partnerships with the private sector and the public sector working together to deliver these benefits for all the people and the businesses that seek to work in our cities. But not only is it about underpinning the funding, it's also ensuring there is talent and skills. Now, one of the things that gets missed in the conversation around how do we do these things, people say we need money, or it will take time, or it's difficult. We also need people who will be thinking in different ways. We must ensure that younger people are engaged in this program. I know my colleague from London, Tim Campbell, who's at the back, has been talking about enterprise and young people and inspiring them. Some of these projects, let us not forget, will inspire a generation of youngsters to become engineers, to become architects, and to see the world around them in a different way. They may see the world through the eyes of public transport from the start, rather than from the eyes of people who traveled around in metal boxes and thought that was going to be the future. We must bring in young people, and we must ensure those jobs are delivered as well. That has been a big part of making the case for investment in big infrastructure projects in the UK and London. I'm very proud to say that by getting Crossrail to be delivered, at its peak we will be creating 16,000 jobs in London. At a time of austerity, at a time when economies are struggling, that is a good story as well.
Теперь перейдем к будущему. Итак, будущее – это цифровая инфраструктура и новые технологии. У вас смартфоны у всех здесь есть? Поднимите руку. Да, наверное, не стесняйтесь. И у скольких два таких смартфона? У кого есть iPad или другой планшетник здесь? Сколько устройств мы каждый раз носим с собой? И видите, это показывает, насколько продвинулись вперед технологии. Я думаю, что технологии технологиями, но без соответствующей инфраструктуры мы здесь ничего не достигнем. В 2011 году мне удалось убедить мэра в том, что необходимо открыть специальный отдел, который бы занимался развитием таких технологий, связью в формате 4G, полностью навигацию наладить с тем, чтобы мы видели совершенно четко, где возникают пробки, чтобы перенаправить движение и избежать их.
Coming behind me and others are thinking of many more things: augmented reality, the way we travel, the way we will integrate infrastructure and digital connectivity. This is the future. But what we must do, and I say that in every city, including London and in Moscow, is ensure that we bring that infrastructure to the city now, not wait for it. Because it's all very good that Apple and Sony and other organizations are building these wonderful gadgets that we carry around. But it makes no sense if we can't maximize their potential, if we do not have the infrastructure, the backbone behind it to use them. And they will then help us in terms of mobility, looking after our city, being better environmental citizens as well. We must focus on the new leg of infrastructure, which is technology. And there's huge potential for our cities by doing this, because the industry around this is huge as well. Big global organizations are looking at opportunities in the cities where they're going to be. But thus far, they're floated around in the ether, but they do want to land, and they want to land in cities like Moscow and London. And when they land, they create innovation, they create jobs, they create new ways of living our lives. But we must attract them into our cities. And how do we do that? By what I said at the start. We must ensure that our cities are fit for purpose and that they work. So it's a circular argument. If we are going to bring new business, if we are going to bring innovation, we must still be ploughing ahead with our policies, such as what the Deputy Mayor set out in his presentation. I applaud what is happening in Moscow. I applaud it Because I have to say, some of it I was doing 4 years ago. Some of it I wasn't. Some of it I can tell you actually you might want to do. I was interested in the permit scheme for cars. We did that. We also started charging lane rental for people spending time on our roads when they're digging it up. Because we realized the cost of digging up a road in London was £1 billion a year to the economy of London when it caused congestion. So why not charge people if they're going to do it, those organizations that are on our streets? But there is much we can do, and I know there will be more to be done going forward. But, as I say, if you want a new Moscow or a new London, it is a new way forward. It is about those phones that we have in our pockets. One of the things that has revolutionized the way people move around London is the way we have provided data out to people to develop applications, those apps on our phones. And a real example is bus data. About a year ago, we released all the information that we used to keep around bus timing. Now, if you go to a bus stop in London, there is a system called Countdown, and you can see when the next bus is going to arrive. That information, because there is that being passed from the buses back to the central control, we let out as free. Data provided to people to use. And what do those great young minds who are out there sitting on their computers programming apps do? They created applications that enabled people to see on their phones when those buses are arriving. Now, it seems quite simple, doesn't it? I look at my phone, I put in the number of the bus stop, and it tells me 2 minutes next bus, 5 minutes next bus, 10 minutes next bus. But you know what? It means you never, ever have to stand at a bus stop again. Simple thing, but completely changing the way that 6.4 million journeys are done in London every day. The first application that came out stayed in the iTunes top 10 for 6 weeks, knocking off some of the big singers like Lady Gaga and others in terms of applications. But it's about the way technology can make it easier for us to understand simple information and then change the way we approach moving around our city. It is an exciting time. That's a small example of what can possibly happen. Going forward, it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for all of our cities. I now am looking at operational systems in cities. When we run metros, when we run modes, when we run intelligent transport systems, enforcement, traffic light management, looking at actually cycling behavior. I know the Deputy Mayor mentioned cycling. We have delivered a very successful cycling revolution, the Mayor calls it in London. A cycle hire scheme that on some days is used by 50,000 users a day, obviously depending on whether it rains or snows. But the potential is huge to carry on the movement where people are leaving the motor car behind, especially in dense urban areas, and moving on to other modes. What we must do is ensure the infrastructure is there to provide the capacity, the technology is there to make it simple, and we keep investing in it to make sure there is enough so people don't go back to the car. It's a huge challenge. I know that you feel there's a challenge in Moscow here, but I say from someone who in 2008 stared into the eyes of London and felt a sense of trepidation about how much we had to do. It can be done, and we are all going to work together to make sure cities like Moscow get it done and become even more successful going forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for such an inspiring presentation. I'm turning the floor to Federico Casalegno, who in fact is an authority on the topic we've been entertaining. That's the innovative IT to make life in major cities, in mega cities, more comfortable, more connected. And if I may ask you, please stay in 10 minutes slot so that we would have Q&A time.
Turn on the first slide. The first slide.
Well, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Federico. Thanks, Federico Casalegno. Thanks for the introduction. And actually, it is really my pleasure to be here and to have the chance to share with you some of the research and the work that we are doing. So thanks to the Deputy Mayor and to the City of Moscow for the invitation and for the organization that you have done, for what I've seen a fantastic job in putting together private companies, university thinkers, and the public sector to rethink urban mobility. And the title is really appealing, the mega city on a human scale, which is a very interesting way to approach how we can rethink cities and mobility. Today I've been asked to share for 10 minutes, so for just to give a sense of a few ideas on transportation, but with a focus on the user. So I've taken this very seriously, and I'm thinking now to the user. And when you think to the user, and you see some funny pictures, when you think to user, you can design a perfect technology such a bicycle. And then you put these technologies into user hands, and they really redesign and use in a very different way what you have designed and made for them. So users' imaginations, user creativity, user needs is really larger than what we can think about. User, they find also a way to adapt an existing system of transportation to their own needs in a very unpredictable way. So it is really critical and important for us really to put the user at the center of our attention when we want to rethink transportation and mobility. Especially in cities, and especially in cities that grows at very fast pace like Moscow, and what you're doing the last few years. So to give you a sense of few projects, and I will show a very short video here. We have been working in how we can redesign technologies to involve citizens in helping the urban planning and helping to understand mobility and transportation systems. So the video that you are going to see here is a very short video about the technology that we have designed, developed, and tested in Porto Alegre in Brazil. And basically we have been working with user and citizen, having citizen as reporter. So the case here is you have a patrol on the street after a big storm that really creates some damage and on the infrastructure, a patrol on the streets, but also affected seriously the way people circulate, so how people use cars, the traffic in the area, the way people used to run businesses and so far. So students and users and citizens, they started to film and record every move. So they, you can see here the patrol, then they put a sign to make sure that the authority and the citizen and people on the traffic knew that there was an accident. Then they put a doll to be a little bit more provocative and trying to send a message to the city government, say, we have a problem here. So they have kept filming what was happening in this particular area in order to report streets element to the city government. And this was precious until the end, and you will see at the end when the city government at the end repaired the streets. And actually, by the way, the guy who did this work has been then employed by the municipality because he did an excellent job in Porto. But the point here is really how you can collaborate with users. Users knows what are the needs, and user can be really affected. So other example about this was, how citizens report on bus stops and the way buses stopped in a particular area, so users were obliged to deter and stop in a very dangerous way and so far. So again, how we can intelligently utilize and involve citizens in reporting back about the city. So this is one point. Point number two is related to open data. We discuss a lot about open data, but basically cities today are living organisms that act and react at a very fast pace, and open data really let us think the city as a platform for us to be used. So open APIs, open data are really a way for citizens to put their hands into what's happening in the city and design services and technologies that will benefit in the end citizen. Let me give you only one example. What happened in New Jersey, New York after the hurricane few weeks ago. After the hurricane, it was very difficult for people to communicate, to access to services, to get electricity, so it was a very bad situation. And one of the problems was to access to gas. So citizens needed to fill up their cars, use their cars, and find gas stations, not only to find gas stations, but actually gas stations with gas. And there were like very huge lines to get access to that. And what happened is the government tried to find the right solution, but was very difficult for some legal issues. A small college in New Jersey actually, with teenagers, designed an application that basically was able to tell users where the gas stations were. So users were able to be redirected to the right gas stations and know exactly how much gas they had and how long was the line and where to get access to resources. So this is a very small innovation, but the idea is how we can utilize open data in order to design applications that somehow have an impact in our life and especially on mobility, and let us rethink mobility in a different way. Third element, we have been working with the city of Paris, and we have been asked to redesign interactive bus stop, which we did. So the way we did actually was very interesting because we had several elements, and the idea for us and the most important point is when we have been working with the RATP, which is the Public Transportation Authority in Paris, when we have been working with them, the notion was really how can we rethink not transportation but mobility. So mobility is the key word here, and mobility is a term that has been used very recently. It is a new term. 20 years ago, the focus was on transportation, how we can efficiently build systems that transport people from one point to another. It was a mechanical transportation system, an engineeristic problem, which is, of course, very important, is critical. But the point is really how can we rethink mobility? Mobility includes transportation, of course, but mobility considers that humans travel on the city, and we have needs to access to people, to information, to technology. So the idea of rethinking mobility for us was a way, how can we rethink services? How can we redesign services so people can access to what they need at the local level? So instead of rethinking mobility and how you can only redesign efficiently transportation system, how you can also provide more information. So people is more informed, and somehow you change the needs for mobility for people from go to one place to another. So this was very interesting, and when we redesigned the public interactive bus stops, one point was to simply install a webcam so you could have a video conference with an agent, with a transportation agent, and he could advise you on what was the best routes to take. And also one of the problems was that the 30% of people has issues in reading a map. So how can you help people to read the map so they're more inclined to take public transportation system? So we have been working on this area of making more efficient the way people utilize public transportation. But also we have transformed the public bus stops into a place for conversations. So you can rethink and reimagine where people can post messages, ask services, give rates to local shops, search for jobs or search for babysitters, sell a car. So basically where you can really have a public communication system to reinforce local communication at the local level. A first project, and then I will stop here. We have been working with Cisco in the Cisco system, and one of the projects that we have done was to redesign a personal travel assistant. And what we mean by that is that we design applications to navigate through the city. But the main concept of the personal travel assistant was not only to give you the right information or how can you go from one place to another, but actually to collaborate with each user in order to facilitate the mobility. And the initial use case was you go to work, you jump into your car, you're stuck on traffic. So a personal travel assistant will tell you, why don't you go in this place, you have a video conference, you stay here for a couple of hours, you do your work here, I have reserved a video conference facility in these hotels, and then in 2 hours you will go to the job to your workplace where the traffic light will be much lighter. So the idea of not only interact with the user, giving information about routings, but really trying to find route solutions for the users. And we have tested the system in Seoul, Korea. So I will actually stop here. I've been asked to stay really within the 10 minutes to allow us to have some discussions. So I will end my presentations, and I will thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Federico, for very interesting ideas. It will be quite interesting to see which of these ideas can be implemented in Moscow. And now I would like to go over to the next subject, the transport infrastructure, and how we can make the right decisions on priorities, on expensive or long-term solutions on different projects. So the right selection, the right choice in infrastructure. So I would like to give the floor to Pierre Laconte, who will tell us about major infrastructure projects. And he will share with us his expertise as an urbanist and a member of many associations on public transport.
Well, thank you. It's also my pleasure to be here, and I wish first of all to congratulate the city of Moscow for the extraordinarily interesting document which I have the pleasure to read in September, which is the government report, the government of Moscow report about hub strategy, which has been the basis of the presentation of today. And I just would like to add one little comment before starting my own presentation. The idea of having parking permits for residents is a very good idea, and the best practice which I recommend you to go and look at is Zurich in Switzerland, where they introduced it in 1985, and thus which has a long-term experience and which is extraordinarily positive. About the time permits for public transportation for time 1 hour and a half, the best practice in my opinion, as former head of UITP, is the experience of Naples in Italy, where after the law of 1992, the mayor was able to choose a non-politician to become the head of transport in the department, and he chose Ennio Cascetta, and the result is just fantastic. You just look on the website of the city of Naples and the province of Campania, because the two are linked. One permit is for very short 1.5 hours for the city of Naples, and the other one is the whole province, and that's 2 hours. Just before starting my own presentation. So the presentations I will like to make is a very difficult one, because mobility depends not only on the city of Moscow, it also depends on the national railways. And the national railways have a national agenda which is totally different from the one of Moscow. So that is a big problem, and that is what I'm going to treat in 10 minutes. The first point is the link, which is of course obviously the main one, between Moscow, St. Petersburg and Helsinki. Now this requires an additional new road in parallel, a new track in parallel with the existing one. Here the danger is, of course, that the national railways often have the objective to push the high-speed rail out of the city. That is a big danger where the city of Moscow should be very careful. Here the best practice is clearly Germany, where they have imposed to the national railways, the whole government has imposed to the national railways never to have a high-speed station which would not be in the center of the city. While in France, unfortunately, many high-speed stations are now outside of cities, which is a free gift to the car industry. Now, the point I want to make here is that you already are on a very good situation today in Moscow, because both the high-speed or future high-speed rails are connected with two important railway stations of the Moscow system. So that is, in my opinion, extremely positive as a whole, by the way. Needless to say, the metro of Moscow is one of the best in the world, because it has not only the radial lines but also an orbital line. Now, for the future, if you really want to reduce air traffic and reduce intercity car connections, my opinion, you should go, like Europe, into a real high-speed network, as you can see, which would link Moscow with all the main capitals of regions and cities, which would be very important for the mobility in Moscow itself, because more people would arrive by public transport rather than by car. And Zecchi Vicano, whom you know from Italy, have made a proposal which I personally like very much. I'm not going to explain it in detail, but it's in the paper if you are interested. The link between high-speed rail and stations of metro and regional rail are of essential importance. Now, the next point I would like to make is that besides high-speed rail, you have an extraordinary capital here, which is the industrial rail system. The industrial rail system is now used mainly for freight. It is in the hands of a different company, which is not related to the city of Moscow, but it is an extraordinary capital, because besides left and right of the track, you have a huge amount of land, usually industrial land, which is ready to be rebuilt and reused in a way which would be favorable to the objectives of the city. That I'm not going to go much further into that, but what looks to me as most important is, and it's also in your master plan, is this new ring of regional rail, which would be different from the ring of the metro. And thus the connection between these two rail links is, to me, the key of success, and that requires a very heavy infrastructure investment. Now, the next point is, if you go into this kind of infrastructure development, you have to make a choice. Because the choice is obviously, which was told, repeated to us this morning, is the... I'm going too fast. Can you help me? Oh, yes, here, that is all. You have to make a choice. And the choice is, of course, to increase the infrastructure in roads. We heard this today, earlier this afternoon, this morning, that you have spent $2 billion for 10 kilometers of that red infrastructure, and that it is really too expensive for Moscow. So my suggestion would be to begin to think about the criteria of choosing between roads and rail investments. And these criteria are, in my opinion, the following. First, space savings. The space you can save on transport, you can use it on investment on things which are bringing money. And these space savings have been shown by RATP in France, and we have taken over in UITP, If you compare the space of a pedestrian using public transport and you compare it with a bicycle, there is already a change from 1 to 7 because the bicycle needs to be parked. If you take the car, it's 18 times more space just by running, but you have to add again the space needed when you park. And if you park the whole day, which is the case in Moscow for all the people who come by car to their work, you come to a difference of 1 to 100. Thus, in other words, it's not 1 to 10, it's 1 to 100. And that means that it's a completely different animal in terms of space consumption. In the one case, you have space used by transport. In the other case, you have space used by vehicles, which 90% of the time are not transported, but are just lying there. The second criteria is health. Public health in Soviet Union was very bad. It is now better. But it is clear that the cost of health care by people who are sitting in a car, those who are sedentary, are being shown in England. I don't know if our speaker from London is aware of that, but that cost is in time of life expectancy and life and cost for the social security by all the chronic diseases which are related to sedentary living are multiple, much higher than you believe. And by using public transport, people are obliged to walk a little bit more, and it obliges them, of course, also to do a bit of physical exercise. And the last point, and that was beautifully mentioned in the previous session, the public transport, by bringing people together like pedestrians, public transport brings people together, and it therefore adds a dimension of a livable city, the pleasure of the city. This is a poster by a famous Austrian painter, Hundertwasser, which was made for UITP, which shows how the city can become more enjoyable thanks to a better public transport. Have I kept my 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the railway system as a very important top priority in our city. Now I give the floor to Vadim Khrapoun. He will tell us about the importance of pedestrian space, how we can make our city more livable and more attractive to people, not to cars. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. It's true, as Maxim said in the beginning, the focus on the user. I think if we proceed from this focus, all these previous presentations were indirectly connected with this theme, with this subject. So in our discussion, I would like to share some views about that. We are all users here. When we were preparing for this session, when we were preparing our presentations, we were asked two things. First of all, please try to be as specific as possible. Not tell us about the life in general, but please tell us about specific things. And the second point, how it can be applicable to Moscow. So I would like to apologize for before those who do not know Moscow quite well. So we will be talking about streets and the pedestrian spaces. So I'm trying to illustrate this on the map. So those who know Moscow well, please make sure that you will see the common names of the streets and titles. So, first of all, just referring to the previous presentation, you were saying about pedestrians. So let's talk about pedestrian zones. So, so now the transport dominates our streets, is trying to elbow out the pedestrians. You know, there was an attempt to arrange car parks in the pedestrian zones, on the sidewalks. So there was always a question, what can be done with pedestrians? Well, of course, we do have some pedestrian zones, and they are being developed. So quite many things are being done already. But what we can do better, what we can improve. We have Stoleshnikov side street, Teatralny. There are quite many pedestrian zones like Arbat. which has become fully pedestrian zone in the 90s. But what we lack right now is the integration, is the linkage between all those areas, the zones. So that's an important salient feature of the pedestrian project. Not just like separate streets like Stoleshnikov Periolog. I think it should be connected, should be linked up with Kuznetsky Most. So it's quite an interesting idea behind this. It's why we need to perform all that. So the logic behind is that the more pedestrians we have, the less cars will be in the area. So, and in other words, when people travel not by car, they will be able to reduce the time needed for traffic for arriving in their workplace. So there are mid-term, short-term, and long-term goals, but there are 5 important points here that I would like to draw your attention to. There will be just 5 slides here. First of all is the zoning. So where exactly these pedestrians should walk and what they look like. So after we do this zoning, so we have to connect all these zones together, and then we'll have to, we are supposed to see where exactly we should put the pedestrians so as to ensure that there is a balance between pedestrians and the public transport. So the idea behind this is we need to get a kind of an integrated pedestrian network. Now, as regards zoning, so this slide that you can see here, so the idea behind this was as follows. So there is a so-called inner ring and the outer ring, the orbital. So the inner ring is the, the streets surrounding this area. So that's the inner ring. That's where we are right now. So the idea is that the priority should be given to pedestrians within this inner circle. So probably some of you remember that the place where we are right now, there was no square, no pedestrian zone here. It was just a transportation thoroughfare. Now, right now, you can walk to the red square. So this is an idea of link between these areas as that I mentioned before. As for the outer ring, so there is a proposal to use the boulevard ring as a kind of a boundary that will divide the north of Moscow from the pedestrian areas. The Moskva River runs in the south of the city. That's why this outer ring is not closed. There is a chance to. There's a night sites, points of interest like theater, museum, and other pedestrian areas that can be linked via the Moskva River. Well, of course, we cannot give full priority to pedestrians because the traffic will stop at this point. But we have to think about balancing out this problem. So, the second important criteria is the interconnection between different zones. The main emphasis here is on the comfortable access to transportation routes and into interchanges and junctions. And I think the key transport hubs such as railway terminals, underground stations and others. So these are actually the key points where we have to think about when we build this sort of transportation network. So that's where you can make a decision whether you would like to walk or to ride. The next step, the question of integration within the inner ring. As I said, we've divided the central area into 2 rings, the inner ring and outer ring. As for the inner ring, there is a question of safety and comfortable underpasses or probably those that will be located above the surface. So we need to connect to ensure there is a link between all these underpasses and other pedestrian areas. So there's another important element related to safety, the so-called safe islands, as you saw abroad. So there is a portion of the road which is slightly elevated above the sidewalk. That's a kind of an area where a pedestrian can stop. So also the traffic lights with a button that you can press when there is no traffic, and so on and so forth. So there is a There are some other areas in the inner ring. So just right next to us, if you look at Znamenka and Kameny Most, there is a kind of a triangle there which is not used at the moment, which can be integrated and made quite comfortable for pedestrians, and which is what is already being done right now. As regards the outer ring, as I've added is this to my presentation. So the link between Boulevard Ring and this area is very important because it includes Gogolevsky Boulevard, Strasnoye Boulevard. So actually the recreation places is quite comfortable for pedestrians, nice places to walk by. So when you approach the Strasnoye Boulevard, you approach the Trubne Square and you have to cross it. So you have to be able to cross over the Trubne Square to the next area. So one of the important components and the key elements is the southern part of the city. So one of the ideas here that will help us to reach this linkage is the use of the southern section, the Tretyakovskaya underground station with the theater museum. And possibly just the last point, well, of course, it's one can argue about this, about whether these zones are right. There are certain points on this slide, the so-called 5-minute zones. So you should always have a choice how you can access certain areas. So when you, for example, walk out of a metro or the subway station, you'll see different links, different connections, and there are different areas where you can walk plus minus 5 minutes. So it's a kind of area at a kind of attraction zone that has to be renovated to make sure it's as comfortable for pedestrians as possible. And this is how these zones, these 5-minute zones, can be interconnected afterwards. So this slide shows these zones about 400 meters roughly that covers the entire area. And of course, here we can talk about visualization, and we can give full priority to pedestrians wherever possible. No vehicles, and that will make their movements as comfortable as possible.
Даже подскажет, надо закругляться. Я понимаю, что последним выступать всегда сложно, поэтому я, наверное, тогда как бы вот предпоследний.
It's hard to be the last speaker. I'm told to wrap up, and all those elements put together represent various points, and there are pedestrianized areas, so I think I'll just very briefly walk across some pilot project slides. It's Nikolska Street, and it's very close to this place. And that's the current view of the street. So in the first phase, what we can easily do, we can remove part of the street, some kiosks, and we will see more space for metering parking and metered parking, and then we will have just same level for cars and pedestrians. And road junctions, they represent us a lot of headache. So whether we'll leave it as it is or we will turn it into a pedestrianized area, fully pedestrianized, and we shall still analyze what impact it will have on traffic. There is another idea having to do with weekends streets, and which on our weekends or on holidays are closed for traffic. And we do it partially even now for Formula 1 races and for some other occasions. And those who visited other countries saw some New York streets closed for traffic, and embankments in France, and we can see that this methodology does work, and this the Exhibition Road in London, another picture, and Broadway is another very ambitious project. So you can compare the two pictures taken at different times. at underpasses and entertainment and recreation areas. So we are aware of all those modern approaches, and we understand that they do work. In summary, we need to account for those 5 most important points. It's the zoning, 5-minute zones, infrastructure, both physical improvement and mobility, which was really in the focus of attention here. And you can try to use Google to see your route, and I think you'll find something interesting. So weekend streets and seasonal streets. That concludes my very brief presentation, and if you have questions, I'll take them later on. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vadim. It's a very important topic, and being Muscovites, we would like to see it more comfortable for mobility, for movement. We have time only for a few questions, and I saw some gentleman raising his hand even in the middle of the session. Can we use a microphone? I'm Vladimir Sokolov. I'm from the Pedestrians Union, NGO. It's an interregional organization. I would like to ask Maxim Liksutov. We are very pleased to see priority for pedestrians in the new concept of Moscow. And we are really happy that we'll have more pedestrian spaces, and that there will be video cameras recording all violations by car drivers, and unified passes is another positive thing. Still, there are 2 issues, and because those video cameras that are installed throughout Russia, they mostly record violations outside crossing areas, street crossing areas. But abroad, I could see a lot of video cameras focusing on street crossings. But in Moscow, I think we have only a single camera of that kind, and it can record up to 150 violations a day. Another question that I'm about to ask was partially answered by Pierre Laconte, and it's about the construction of new roads linking some Moscow parts and relieving Moscow from cargo transport from trucks. And we know about the plans of the Moscow government about the construction of several radial roads to relieve some parts of the Moscow from traffic. However, if so, our concern is that when those roads are being built, they can impede some mobility and movements in those areas on customary roads. And I would like to learn more about the plans of the Moscow government in those areas. Thank you very much for your questions. As a matter of fact, you are quite right, and we think that till recently pedestrians were mostly disregarded in the Moscow transport policy. Now this section is our priority, and as for violations at street crossings, I can say that we are testing a system, a new video recording system, which would record all those cases when cars do not let pedestrians cross the road. And I think from Q2 next year, those video cameras and video systems would be installed at the most intensive street crossings, and as for those new radial roads, it's going to be not only the construction or upgrade of the existing ones, but we will try to go underground, to lay those roads underground, so that or we will build underpasses. Well, as for the old habits, probably pedestrians will have to choose some new routes, but in most of the cases we will account for their customary routes, so that pedestrians would not be impeded. Dear friends, we have only 5 minutes to go, enough just for 1 or 2 questions. Good afternoon, I'm Alexander Shusky. Maxim, I have a question for you, 2 questions. First, in terms of figures and numbers, we are often told that 80% of traffic is attributed to public transport and 20% for private. And if we calculate the current traffic, it's different. 14 million trips are made by public transport and 3.5 trips by cars, but in the Moscow Outer Ring alone we have 6 million car trips a day. Well, you didn't quite understand those figures. I said something differently. And sometimes passenger trips are confused with passenger throughputs. And secondly, the centralized system in the city, you know, the problem is that up to 50% of all the jobs are located in downtown. And I think it is to be corrected, and otherwise we will have traffic jams for both cars and public transport. And that's the reason why those dedicated lanes lead to downtown only. So as long as we have the bulk of jobs here in downtown, we would face traffic jams. So what are you going to do about that, about better spreading? Well, actually, I was expecting that the questions will be more provocative. As for the ratio between cars and public transport in percentage points, actually, I spoke of 88 percentage points at rush hours only, and enters inside the third transport ring area. So you cannot apply that particular figure to the entire daily traffic. And if it's the entire area, then 55% public transport and 45 cars, but the most important measurement is done during rush hours. As for cars, I didn't quite understand your question, but when we calculate car rides, we think that a car is carrying 1.25 persons per trip. It's quite an embarrassing calculation, but still, it's for our purposes. As for the unloading the downtown, we don't expect that the trend will change in the next 5 to 7 years. We are fully aware of the challenge and we are working on that, but it cannot be changed too fast. And that was rather the reason why the territory of Moscow was expanded quite significantly, so that companies which want to sit in downtown and who thinks it's of paramount importance for their status would stay. But we're going to develop the merged areas, and we will build dozens of millions of square meters over there. And we understand that the decentralization is one of our key challenges. And the current problems and the decisions were taken, and those dedicated lanes are the immediate remedy for some solutions. We are out of time really, but still I think we can afford one more question. I'm Draganigan from the Democratic Choice Party. As for the new Moscow territories, I live there and I am aware of the situation. You say that a lot of development will be there, creating jobs, and you told us about the construction layouts, nice pictures, low-rise condominiums, and I like it immensely. However, currently we see the opposite, high-rise development without schools, without polyclinics. And following the news of the merge with Moscow, there is a development boom, and the situation with transportation is so intense there. People that makes people think how to move to Moscow, where they see the problem less. And so my question is, what are you going to do to address that problem? And shall we have to wait for the time when the new master plan is completed? Because when you come to that, it will be so bad that people will run away from there. I understand that question is again goes to me. So as for the new territories of Moscow, I would say that we have largely inherited that problem. And you might have already been told that when the decision was taken to merge that territory, most of the licenses had already been issued for the development. And in that layout, no roads, highways, and social infrastructure were planned. So in our capacity, we can readjust that, and we're launching a program of 2 phases. First phase, some immediate measures so that to allow bus transportation to ride through those narrow streets. And that's first what we are going to do. We started already that, and we hope that we will straighten that up till next summer. And secondly, we are going to further develop the network of subway, metro, and commuter trains. And by today, we have already taken all decisions of principle to develop more metro lines, and we have made our plans for building stations. However, all the decisions related to that heavy infrastructure have already been taken. So I suggest, I expect to relieve that problem a little bit in the next 2 years. However, so what makes us optimistic or makes us confident about that? We have land there where that infrastructure can be built, unlike in the city where we don't have that space for maneuver. That's what I can say. We have exhausted our time, so if you still have more questions, so leave them for sidelines. Maxim, can you say some words in conclusion? Well, I can only thank you all for your participation, and in my department we are not afraid of most provocative questions and challenges. We are totally open. Thank you for arranging this session, and we will coordinate our efforts in the future as well.